How difficult has it been to replace Luke McCowan? You mentioned him there. Obviously your captain, and how delighted were you to see him getting his big move to Celtic?
Absolutely delighted, brilliant boy. I remember a good conversation with him when he phoned me last summer when I went into the job, and he wasn't sure if he was going to sign his contract because I think he came a wee bit to the end with the club. He was thinking and I had a brilliant conversation with him. Luke was a winger, a wide player, but a frustrated wide player because good footballer, but he never got enough. He depends on service for midfielders, as you know, but kind of spoke with him, changed his game. I remember pre-season we played against Fleetwood, Bruni's Fleetwood down there, and I put him in the middle of the pitch. He played in a kind of a number 8 role, and he just a different way, and that's what kind of took it to the other level. And I gave him kind of responsibility, a lot of things in that as well, and he just grasped it. He was just ready for it. So him in particular has been a big loss. On the back of losing Joe Shaughnessy, who I brought in as my captain, Trevor Carson, who was my vice captain, through injury wasn't he there, and then to lose Luke, who became my captain as well. So I've lost 3 captains. So that's difficult, as well as the player. He's got in the dressing room, he had a huge influence as well. So it is difficult that to replace, but there's good ones there. But it did, the timing of it and all that as well. I think, start of the season we were absolutely flying. I think we scored the most goals in Scotland and all that kind of stuff. And Luke was a huge part of it. So when you take that out of your team, it is hard to replace. But I believe I've got boys that are stepping up and will continue to step up. But as you'll know, it doesn't happen overnight, that.
No.
Yeah, we watched, I was up there for the derby, and he was in the middle of the park.
Aye.
And there was all that speculation. How did the conversation with him go? Celtic are interested. Did you think, or do you think, he's going to play, he's going to become a regular? What does he have that suggests to you he's a Celtic player?
I think he's robust enough for a start. He's the technical ability, but he's just got a belief. He's one of the ones that everything I gave him much more responsibility, obviously, when I'm captain of the club, and he was ready for it. And I think he's now, when you look at him playing with Celtic, every time I see him, he's in the style of play. He understands their style of play as well, and the movement, the runs. They do the wee runs down the side of half speed. He gets all that, and his game intelligence, I think, has come up hugely. So I think he's a player, and I see him now a player there that's just at that stage where he's getting better and better and will continue to improve, and that's down to his personality. He's not a boy that was going to sit there. That conversation, as I say, I had with him in the summer, it was all about, I really want to go further, and I always say that to boys that you try and sign. If they're just coming to sign with Dundee, you want them to sign with Dundee and use that as a platform, because you want them to better your team, you want them to better themselves, and everybody wins out it. That was very much what Luke McCowan is, and because of what he's done, and he deserves all the credit, he's now got to sell where he rightfully should be playing, and I think he'll do really well at Celtic.
Have you got good Scots in your maybe coming up from the youths that can maybe make an impression, that can maybe be a Lyle Cameron, a Luke,
Yeah, there's an exciting group coming through now, and this is something that the new training ground will really help with. The fact that there's a training base that for us specifically, but there's a good batch coming through. But behind Luke now, you've got, as you mentioned there, you've got your Lyle Camerons, Josh Mulligans, Finn Robertsons, who'll look at Luke, because he's that wee bit older, and see there's a pathway. And for the younger ones as well, see there's a pathway. But listen, Luke deserves all the credit for it, because he's been, for day one, sometimes with players, Tom, the penny drops at a different stage, and Luke was a talented footballer. I think he did need to get in the middle of the park to express himself more as a footballer. But he's training every day, his standards, his maintenance of his standards, he's actually inspiration to others. That's what we miss, on the training ground, that he drags people through it and that as well. So he deserves all the credit for that.
Maybe similar to Paul Hartley situation, where I think it was at Billy Stark that put him in the middle of the park for St Johnstone.
Yeah.
I played with Paul at Hibs, and he was a frustrated winger as well.
Aye.
But put him in the middle of the park, and he gave
we had the discussion the other day there about young kids coming through, and Tom was kind of stats that they're not coming through as quick. Do you see a reason why they're not coming through?
There's possibly the stress of the league, that how many players do you get opportunity. It's well documented again. I've got quite a bit the youngest team in the league, and I had last year as well. And I've always been of the opinion that if they're good enough, they're old enough. But and I'll play boys on merit. If Lyle Cameron's an example of that, Josh Mulligan, Finn, they'll play because they're the best players in that position. But I trust them. I think you need to have a trust in them, but I can understand managers that you maybe go with a bit more experience because you're scared of your position in the league. So, but I think given the opportunity, you know, the benefits you see with some of the kids, that some of them are fearless, you know, they'll go out and... But you know what, there's other sides to that as well. At the moment, you know, I've got a very young team, and particularly when it's a young defensive sort of, they'll make mistakes. I think what you need to realise is part of the education is they will make mistakes, but it's how they learn from that. And that's the thing that comes, how much leeway do you give them for making mistakes? Because if that impinges on you losing football games, then you're going to do something about it.
Well, we had Stephen Robinson in here and he says, it's all great, you know, you're calling for me to develop youngsters in a league where, you know, sometimes the 8 of the league is fighting to avoid that playoff place. Yeah. But he said 3 games in it, you know, the way the game's going now, 3 games, 3 losses, people are calling for the sack.
That's it. And that probably is the pressure rate. But so, I mean, I'm just very much that I'll put in the best players, and it just so happens I've got good young players, you know, but that does encourage other young players, you know, and it does give them, as I said about Luke and the other boys that I mentioned as well, it does give them role models, and it's a pathway for them as well to think, if I really graft during the week, you know, in training, do everything I can, and I get that opportunity, I'm going to take it. So that's what I'm looking for, and that's what I'm looking to develop in the squad, and that's what we've got at the moment.
You mentioned Gordon Strachan and the trust thing. I'll often say to Ruffy, you know, growing up with your mates and anybody who was from your area, your village, you grew up with them, you stick by them, you don't go against them. When you get to a situation where you've grown up with a lot of people that you know in the East Kilbride area and there's a real sense of togetherness, are you surprised one of them has been a dissenter and tipped Dundee to go into the playoff place? Has that shocked you? Did that shock you? You know, is there any meeting in the East Kilbride area about it?
I think there's a wee meeting in the Monty Grill at the weekend, and I think we'll be having a wee chat about that. I mean, over a Guinness.
You know, you used a word before you come on here. It's treason.
Treason. There you go.
I'm never right, so you're all right.
You thought you were going to get away with it, didn't
I
you?
did. I knew you were going to say it. You would say that before you were coming in, Tony. Listen, I just think there's 6 or 7 clubs down at the bottom of the league, and there's not much between them. And personally, I think Hibs and Hearts will climb the table at some point. And honestly, I think it's a scrap between any 6 that can go into the bottom 2. I think it's so tight, Tony.
What would you change? What would you change about this league? Because I think we can sustain a 16 or an 18.
I think we can. I think the biggest part of that for me is the playing surfaces. I think it should be in an elite league. It should be the grass pitches, and we're nearly at that. But for example, you bring up Falkirk and other clubs like that are Astro. I think that comes into it as well.
Yeah.
So I would say, a bigger league would benefit everybody. It would benefit development of young players. It would alleviate that. I mean, the league this year is ridiculous how tight it is. It really is. You look at us, we're sitting in 7th, I think, now, but you're only 3 or 4 points away from 4 points away from the bottom. So it is. It's really tight. So that kind of bigger league, I would be an advocate of.
Yeah, because it gives you that chance to maybe get in that middle ground and just solidify, maybe throw in a few more youngsters in there that you don't have that fear.
Aye, it would do. But at the moment, it all depends for me when you go on a run. I mean, last year we went on a run, and it was after, if you remember, the Celtic game, when you asked me about highs and lows. That was a low, looking up at that clock, and it's 6-0 at half time. I think never escaped to victory at half time. We're looking for the tunnel. So, but we came out, and actually after that game, that was what kind of spurred us on, if you like, because the next 3 games we won, and we ended up getting ourselves into the top 6. And that's what I'm saying. It's dependent on when you go on your run. The timing was right there. It was, I think, the 28th of February we played Celtic. It was a month of March that we went in that run.
Was that a learning curve?
Absolutely.
Was that why you were able to then go on the run? Because some people say you learn more in adversity than you do when you're constantly getting the good days.
I think it was. I think because it tests the resilience of your squad. It tests the mentality. And we'd had meetings about it. You know, we'd spoke about it. And the boys did absolutely come back stronger. See,
when you get a bad result like that, are managers more conscious of looking at the fixture list? Do you look at the fixture list and say, 3 or 4 games coming up here?
Might be coming up. I think you do anyway. And for me, I take it in 3 game blocks all the time anyway. But you can. But how often have you seen it when you think, well, look at the run, and you end up, they're the ones that you pick up results. So I don't think there's a science to it, but it does come into your head, you know, when you get a result like that. But as you said, and as I go back to talking about young players and all that, players will make mistakes, you know, and players will get into situations where they don't do it. It's how they learn from it, and that's the most important. And that's what I'm trying to do at Dundee, and I think we had a successful time at last year. We developed players, for example, Luke and Owen Beck, Malachy Boatengs, that have all went on to better things. They made mistakes. I can remember Owen Beck at St Mirren in one of his first games and against the boy McMenamin, and he was really poor. And the easiest thing would be to take him out of the team.
Yeah.
But we had a good chat about it, went through his analysis, what he can do better, blah, blah, blah. And that's when you find the real good players, the ones that learn for that, and they pick up. You tell a good player once, you tell a bad player 100 times.
Yeah.
But if you pick up on that right away, then that's the development. And that's something that we did last year. And it's something that we're still trying, because we're young now. We're really young. We've got a young squad now. You get young Billy Cometti at 21 and Ryan Astley at 22. And even the goalkeeper, John McCracken. So you've got a lot of young players with your Mulligans. But it's going through that process with them, and it's trying to eradicate the mistakes and learn from it and develop from it.
If you're a footballer and you're coming in and you're getting off 6-0, when we talk about levels, you know because you've got the experience to say, well, Celtic could do that to anybody. They've just, not that long ago done it to Aberdeen, who were riding the crest of a wave. How do you then try and say to yourself, I need to lift those players who are demoralised by, an absolute doing?
I think you need to be honest with them. Players will see through whatever you're trying, and you need to take ownership. You need to be with them on that occasion. I don't think you put all the blame in them. I think for me anyway, if you go into that together as a team and say, right, what can we learn for that? Because it's not just the end of it. That's my first year as a manager, and it is a different gig, absolutely, from being an assistant. And so it's about going through that, but learning from it. And if you do that as a group, I think, from my experience, that's the way through it.